We're having a conversation with Sacha Molitorisz about his new book, From Here to Paternity. In your journey as a dad, you mentioned in our earlier segment that you and your wife were living in Paris, and I know that you were planning to have a baby, you just weren't planning to conceive then. How was that? Because that kind of was a bit fast-tracking for you.
A little bit. I guess the way that I put it is we'd thought about beginning to contemplate maybe potentially looking to have a baby. You know, there's all this kind of, yeah, we're about ready to begin. And we had this rough plan of getting healthy, as a lot of people do, because we've been living in Paris for about 6 or 7 months at the time, and it was a sabbatical from work for both of us. So we've been drinking too much and eating lots of rich, great food. And the plan was not to do anything radical. I know I've heard of people who do the whole overhaul, you know, the complete detox. It wasn't anything that serious, but just to cut down on the drinking a bit. And at the time, we actually weren't being intimate, if I can put it that way, all that often, because we had a small flat in Paris we were living in, and we had so many visitors. If you ever want to see more of your family and friends, move to Paris. They'll come and visit you. And so we had this small window where we could just enjoy each other's company between 2 sets of visitors. And I thought that at that particular time, there wasn't a chance of Jo becoming pregnant just because of her cycles. But nature had other ideas. We obviously didn't calculate very well or didn't know how to use contraception properly, because ED's are the result.
Snuck in.
Yeah.
Well, also you use that figure that only about 50% of conceptions go to full term. Right,
yeah. I can't remember that figure myself, but there are all sorts of figures in there that are really fascinating, and that is one of them. I'll take my word for it.
Check the book out later.
Yeah, I'll have to read it.
Okay, so the journey through to, because Jo also had was it a gallbladder?
Gallstone, yeah.
Gallstone. What happened there?
There is no such thing as an ordinary pregnancy, is a saying that you hear a lot. And the more I learn about it, the more I realise I don't know about pregnancy and fatherhood, and that so many unexpected twists and turns happen along the way. And one for us was that it must have been a few months into the pregnancy the first time Jo just felt these incredible pains. And she's very stoic and doesn't really let on when she's in a bit of pain. So she just put it down a bit of indigestion, which she's never had before, and which can happen during pregnancy as well. And these bouts got worse, and they would go all night, and she was in real pain, I could tell. And they started to become more frequent. And eventually, after a few months, she was about 6 months pregnant, I think, when we finally went to hospital, and she stayed in all day. Having all these tests done, and they established that it was gallstones. And that is quite a common side effect of pregnancy.
Is it really?
It is because a woman's biochemistry just changes enormously during pregnancy. And that's one of the unfortunate side effects, yeah.
Because also you were saying in the book that when a woman, as the pregnancy develops, all the different organs kind of shift to make room for the baby. Is that why the gallstone thing happens?
Not so much because of the shifting organs, but I mean, what a woman's body does during pregnancy is just absolutely astounding. And this is largely a book about fatherhood, of course, but and fatherhood is this incredible transition that you make. But really, compared to what a woman makes as she becomes a mother, it's easy. It's a walk in the park, which is why I think books like this aren't so commonplace, whereas there are thousands of books about the transition to motherhood. A woman, for instance, when she has a baby, when she goes into the labour ward, will generally have about 1.5 times as much blood as she had when she became pregnant. All her organs, as you say, have just shifted in her body. And there are all these details about the physical changes that are just absolutely staggering. And I do touch on them, yeah.
Yeah. And of course, most men wouldn't know about any of this until their wife is pregnant with their child.
Or even when their wife is pregnant, they still wouldn't know. And I wouldn't have known, I wouldn't have found out unless I'd undertaken the book and done all this sort of research. I mean, I wasn't the sort of guy who would go out and buy a book and read all about pregnancy in the lead up to the birth. The stereotype is that that's what women do more than men, and that's certainly true in my relationship. You know, the only way you'd get me to read a book is to get me to write it first.
And done very well. And another area you touch on is that Menace used to be in the driving seat.
Yeah, that's right.
And all of a sudden they've got to go in the passenger seat. How was that for you?
Well, that was a real challenge in a lot of ways. During the pregnancy especially, you're used as a man in a lot of cases to being the doer, to being active, to being in the driver's seat. And then during the pregnancy, it's your wife, your partner, who has this amazing role of growing a human being in her tummy. You know, that's just, to me, such a... It's almost impossible to get my head around how that can be. So you're there, and your role is to knit the scarves, to get the thermos of coffee, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah.
You're in the supportive role, and that comes to an absolute head in the labour ward then, where your partner is, depending on how it's going, but your partner is generally in a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, playing this incredibly crucial role that will affect you for the rest of your lives, and you're just there again, just playing this support role, and that's a real challenge. You want to step in and take some of the pain away and do it yourself. Here, give me that pregnancy, I'll take over, but you can't. That's confronting.
At least for the human species, you can't.
Yeah.
Because we will touch on, like the male seahorse.
Yeah.
It carries a child.
That's right. That's right. One of the things I did, as I mentioned, was to look into fatherhood in the animal kingdom, because it's really interesting to compare different species. I mean, even within mammals, the stereotype is that mammal dads are pretty uninvolved. Mammals, by definition, the mum breastfeeds the young. So that creates a very intimate bond between mother and child, usually quite a dependent child, and the father has often been seen as not being all that relevant. In fact, there have been lots of theorists who say that the dad doesn't need to be there, and it's his biological imperative to go out and impregnate as many women as possible, because that's how he passes on his DNA, his genes. But then there's, I think, from what I can tell, it's the more recent research that's saying, no, it doesn't necessarily have to be like that in mammals, and certainly not in humans. It serves evolution and the species best when dads are more involved and hands-on, because that gives that offspring the best chance of survival. And if the dad isn't there in a supportive role early on in a baby's life, chances of survival aren't so good.
It's interesting, isn't it, getting all those stats? We're going to take another break, and then we'll come back and find out more, because one of the questions that I'd love to ask, according to your research, we're told now it's great for the dad to be in the delivery room. There's many, I guess, answers around that, but also what happens to the couple's intimacy relationship if dad has been there after birth.
That's a very big issue.
Yes, which is when I saw the article and got me to ring you in the first place to say, hey, come on the show, stay with us.